Hello, it is Doug Cunnington here from Niche Site Project. Welcome. And it looks like we have a handful of people on, and with any luck, people can hear me. That would be fantastic if you could hear me. Let me know in the chat where you're from. Let me know. I'm assuming some people will say, hey, yeah, we could hear you. But also let me know where you're from. Vancouver, Dennis, welcome. What's up? And today, this is the webinar on the two methods for creating content for niche and authority sites. I wrote a blog post earlier this week covering those two methods. We're going to do like a live, we're going to try to do a live like hands-on demo. My hands will be on it. I'll take suggestions from the crowd, of course, but we'll go through just like the thought process of creating like these outlines that help us write content and or have other people write the content for us, which is what I do. We have Emil from Stockholm, and Dennis, thanks for confirming that you can see me. Ryan from Mesa, Taylor from San Diego, awesome. And it looks like things are going pretty good in the chat room. We have a few people on here. I see Craig, Taylor, Dan, Jeremy, Sylvain, Jeannie, Simu, Drew, Dennis, Paul, Ryan, everyone welcome, Jake, Sophie, Mike, Kevin, other Mike, Chris, John, Philip, Damien, Robert, David, Ryan. Wow, there's a lot of people on. Sarah, Isaac, Emil, Jitu, and Paul. So if you're joining after this, I won't go through all the names again, but I thank everyone for showing up on time. I was impressed that I showed up on time also, though I probably shouldn't take very much credit for showing up on time. And just curious, like, is this the first time some of you are on? If so, just say hello and say, hey, it's the first time I've been on here. So just curious. Like I said, this is going to be a content-oriented session. I'm going to go through two like live examples, and hopefully it'll be helpful. I know, we read through the steps of, what I wrote in the blog post the other day, but to actually see like me struggle through like figuring out how to write content and then the outline and that sort of thing, hopefully will be helpful. So. All right, and when Damien's from Singapore, we have Jeannie from Maui. What's up? Very good location, San Diego, Hawaii, Mesa. Yeah, awesome. And then Dan says, thanks for doing these webinars. You're welcome. Thanks for showing up. Jake, it's the first time on. Cool, welcome. Damien, first time. And Jitu, the first time. Awesome. And Dan's been on for a few. And Ryan has seen a lot of the videos, but it's the first time live. So hopefully, maybe Ryan and some of the other people that have been on the first time, if you do me a favor and send me an email later, just like, do you like watching the live videos versus the recorded ones and stuff like that? Just any feedback is good, even if it's negative feedback. That's helpful also. So, all right. I know people will be joining in the next few minutes. Anyway, but I'll just go ahead and I think I'll just get started here. So one thing this morning, I was like, okay, I need to make sure that the presentation's ready. Of course, I got to make sure that that's done. But I was thinking, hey, I'm thinking about moving the desk in here. So I'm kind of up against the wall, and it looks like I'm up against the wall. And it could be interesting, and it sort of closes off the room too. It's not a very big room. It's maybe like 12 by 14 or something like that. And if I move the desk like against that wall, I think it may look better just from my laptop camera. But of course, I was wise. Thank goodness. I was like, oh, maybe I could just move the desk. It's kind of big. It's like an L-shaped desk. But if I tried to move it, there's a good chance like everything would be unhooked and there would just be stuff on the floor. So we're in this layout for today, but maybe soon we will, I'll probably need to get help from my wife to like move the whole thing over. But Just a tip, if you're about to go do something live where other people are counting on you, you shouldn't try and move the desk and stuff. So this time I thought ahead and I didn't do that. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen here for the presentation from the Niche Site Project. And this is the exact title from the blog post the other day, but it's 2 fail-proof techniques to streamline content production in niche and authority sites. And it's funny, there's this box around the there's this box right here, and I thought that was just like the editing version, and I thought it would go away. So it's kind of funny. There's a box here. I didn't mean for that to be there. Everyone can hear me, so that's awesome. If something happens and you are unable to hear me or the video freezes, please let me know in the chat. But also, most of the time that can be taken care of if you just refresh your feed, and usually it'll get fixed. Over time, I've started to improve my connection to the internet here. So we have fiber to the house, and now I'm hardwired into the wall. I'm not on Wi-Fi. So usually things are pretty good on my side, but things do happen. Sometimes the servers go down. So just try and refresh first, but let me know in the chat also. Again, I'm Doug, and this is my now late dog, Brody, and my dad here at Old Faithful. So I live in Montana, Bozeman, and we're about an hour and a half from Yellowstone. So it's a big park, so we can get to the entrance in 90 minutes, but to actually get to Old Faithful and some of the other, sites down there could take, 3 hours or so. And now in the height of summer, there's a lot of people in the park, and there's a lot of traffic in the park. So it could take, 4 hours to get down to Old Faithful or the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone or the lake. But it's really cool, being out here. I lived in Atlanta for most of my life, and the traffic was kind of bad. So it's really sort of awesome to live where there's not much traffic. I have been featured or quoted on a bunch of different sites, which you probably recognize some of them here. Maybe you've seen some of my guest posts out there just in general. So, and I just put this in so that you'll have faith that you should believe what I'm telling you, but it's only as good as the results. So I do always put in this timeline. Again, there's a lot of people that have been on this before or on these sessions or have seen timelines like this. But the point is, I've gone through some negative periods. I've had some big successes, I've had big failures. And I think, the more internet marketers that I talk to and entrepreneurs in general, it's the people that adapt, the people that don't get too discouraged. But when something negative happens, we take it, hopefully try and learn something from it and then apply it in the future. And doing that over and over again and dealing with the adversity makes us successful. Very rarely does someone hit it out of the park on their first try. And if that's the story they're telling, there's usually 2 to 5 or 10 years of experience beforehand that helps them be successful. So if you're having, if you're just getting started, you should expect some, some good progress, but you should also expect that things are going to go wrong. A lot of things will go wrong in the future. And if things are going good, they're going to get worse. And if they're bad, they're probably going to get better. So just keep that in mind. If you're in a period where things aren't quite going right, take a step back and be sure you refocus and apply what you've learned in the past to hopefully drive you forward. I'll mention that Q&A is at the end. You can ask questions, while I'm doing the presentation and stuff. And this presentation is a brand new one. I've never done it before. I rarely do the live demos, and it looks like we have about 25 plus people on. So, this is probably a good size to go through, something new. But if you ask a question, I'll probably answer it if it's relevant to the conversation at the time. If it's not relevant to what I'm saying, I'll hold it for the end there. And if you have the ability to mark it as a question, just to the left side of the chat form, you can mark your chats as a question. So that does make it helpful for me to scroll back and see the questions in there. So as I mentioned, this is the two content techniques that I primarily use for my niche and authority sites. I over time have refined these processes, so they're pretty tight. They're fairly repeatable. I made it much more complicated in the past when I was trying to figure them out, but at this point I've removed a lot of the I guess redundant steps or parts that I deemed that they didn't matter. There are other presentations that I've done on Amazon reviews and the templates that you can use for Amazon reviews. I believe that both of these techniques can be used in conjunction, and I'll point out those areas when I get to them. But I think these two techniques can be used in conjunction with the overall Amazon review format if you want this to be a affiliate review, a product review for your site. Additionally, they're versatile enough, the two techniques are versatile enough that you can write informational content. And when we go through the examples, you'll see it's primarily informational content that can be used in the basically product buying guide or features section of the perfect Amazon review. If you're not familiar with the perfect Amazon review, if you go to nichesiteproject.com/blog and go to the start here area, you'll see it on the menu. You should be able to find the perfect Amazon review. So if you haven't seen it before, it's not critical to understand what we're doing here, but it's probably good information for you if you haven't seen that template before. All right. So first, and we're just going to jump right into it and, like I said, see how this live demo goes. So this is the FAQ method, the fact method, and basically it's just what it sounds like. It's frequently asked questions. So when I first launched my site, my niche site, and you know what, I'm going to very first niche site, I really didn't know how to write content. So at the time I had a corporate job. I was doing project management in a software company. So I wasn't writing a lot of original content or anything. I wrote a lot of technical documents, a lot of just general documentation for project work, but it's, it's pretty easy to write dry technical information and then write emails explaining things. So I wasn't doing anything that needed to be, engaging or not attract, but to hook. I didn't have to write anything that would hook a reader that was trying to find out information. So I was basically coming at it cold, trying to think back to, the different kind of essays that I learned how to write in high school. And it was kind of a struggle. In fact, some of you probably got an email from me yesterday where, I asked my wife, hey, can you help me out writing some content? It's only 500 words, that's just a couple pages. Can you just write this short blog post for me? And she was totally confused. She didn't know where to start from. And she's very smart. She has a master's degree. She reads way more than me. And I expected her to be a really strong writer because she reads a lot and she took very advanced English and literature classes and all the stuff that made me think, hey, she should be able to write this very easily. She couldn't, she didn't write it, and I was kind of stuck. So it turned out, and the topic of what I asked her to write doesn't even matter, but the thing is, I didn't know much about it myself. And I sat down with just like a blank piece of paper, just blank paper and pen. And then I just like wrote out all the questions I had about the topic. And I started like super basic. I started with, just I guess like a child's level of knowledge about the topic. And then I asked the questions that I had because it was literally the questions that I had because I didn't know much about it. And I think a lot of people, when you're writing about a specific product for a niche site and you don't know about it, you don't have the product, you don't use the product, like you don't know where to start. The fact technique, the fact method is probably one of the best places to start. So that said, I'm going to go back to the presentation because there's at least like one slide here. Super simple. You write out the questions that you have, you go research it, and then you answer them. It is the most basic, way to get content. And my first super successful site was based solely on this idea. And I, started with about 1,000 words of content, eventually beefed it up to about 4,000 or 5,000 words. This was about 3.5 years ago, almost 4 years ago. So, at the time, like that was pretty long form content. Now I'm telling people to write 10, 12,000 words, and 4,000 was long back then. There weren't many pages, at least in that particular niche, that were that long. So now let's go to the example. And this will be beer oriented. If people have read or seen me around much, you'll know that I'm a beer drinker. I homebrew beer and I keg beer also. And that's where we're going to do this example. So I think maybe the way this will work, I'll get us rolling. But if you have questions about kegging beer, you can put it into the chat, and then I'll add them in here, because I think this is part of the value of like doing this frequently asked question method. You can get your significant other, spouse, a couple friends together. If you have like a lull in the conversation at happy hour or something, you can just like lay this out. And it's kind of like a brainstorming session. I mean, people can just throw out whatever questions they have, and then you can sort it out later. I mean, if it turns out that that's not actually a good question, then you take it out. Okay, so I'm going to try to expand this and not make it too small. I want everyone to be able to read what I'm doing here. I also want to be able to see what's happening. So this is a kegerator that I built. So I was like, I have pictures of these things, so I'm going to go ahead and dig them up. But yeah, this is I think this was the second kegerator that I built, and I've made 3 to 4. I don't actually remember. At some point, this freezer stopped working, and I had to get a new one. But you can see I used just like wood, and then sort of I filled with putty, or I'm not even sure, like a wood compound, and then sanded it all down. So there were like no visible seams on this area here. And then of course I had 4 taps, and it was awesome. So the way we get started here is to just think of the most basic. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next page here so we can actually see what I'm doing. So I usually work in Google Docs just because it's easier. I also it's easier as far as like sharing and just having stuff out on a drive in the cloud. And then I just do a numbered list usually. So this is how to keg beer. And it may be that you really don't know like much about the topic at all. So we may start with like why keg beer? What's the point of it? And we don't have to figure out the answers now. In fact, you should not go and try and find the answers while you're writing the questions. As a brainstorming technique, you should just write them out and then, list as many as you can. And, what we'll do, again, if anyone in the audience has any ideas about questions that you have about kegging, feel free to ask them in the chat and I'll add them in here. So other questions I may have is, how much does it cost to keg? And I'm an expert in kegging beer. Like I've built a few kegerators and I drink a lot of keg beer, but like I know some of the questions that may be out there, even though I know about the topic. The thing is, I'm even going to list questions that like I know aren't great questions, but there would be common questions that people would ask. And Taylor has a great one. How many beers can fit in a keg? So how many beers can fit in a keg? And then let's see, like what temperature should a keg be? Do I need a tap? Because if you haven't picked up a keg before, often they'll ask you if you need like a tap that you could pump with like air versus like my kegerator has like a CO2 tank inside there. So there are different things that you have to think about with I guess like pushing the beer out of the keg. Okay, so do I need a tap? Hey Leo, what's up? Thanks for joining. And how much space does a keg take up? What equipment? What equipment do I need for two keg beer? And then how much space does it take up? Does a keg take up? And what we can do here. So we came up with like 7 pretty quick. And what are common problems? Problems with kegging. Why does the beer foam so much? Okay, so here is a good set. And at some point, you'll realize that you don't have many more questions. And I mean, keep in mind, this is like 9 questions that we came up with in about 4 minutes or something like that. So this, I mean, you could probably come up with 100 different questions if you really started looking around. And most likely, thinking about the keyword golden ratio type idea, I mean, you could put these frequently asked questions in one huge post, but probably each one of these questions is a good long tail keyword. You could write an individual post about it, maybe more in depth. Maybe if you're putting this on a buyer's guide or more, I guess, like informationally driven post where you want it to be sort of an all-encompassing overview of frequently asked questions, you could answer these questions in 2 sentences or so. And then if you wanted to break it out and go in depth, right? I mean, why does the beer foam so much? That's a complicated answer. So you could literally write pages about it, have formulas and graphs and charts talking about how to get your beer to not foam. So the point is, it's a powerful way to come up with a lot of ideas. I do realize if you have no idea about the topic, it may be pretty hard to come up with questions because, your questions may be too basic. One of the best ways to find great questions is to go to a forum, an active forum in the niche. So I happen to know that Homebrew Talk is a huge forum, and it's very, I guess, well, to be redundant, it's active. I mean, there's like hundreds of thousands of posts, and like I don't even know how many members are in here, but it is a very active site, and it's interesting because there are so many, I guess, groups moving over to Facebook and other areas of the internet that are sort of more modern than a forum, but this forum remains very active, like pretty constantly. So what we can do here is, I mean, there's tons of like there's so many more ideas in here. In each one of these like sub forums in here, these subcategories, like those are huge topics with tons and tons of posts. The thing you can do is, because, you know, kegging is such a specific topic, and I didn't even look beforehand, but we'll just go to bottling and kegging here. We can see that there are stickies up here. So first thing to note, in forums, you'll often see these sticky notes because people have like common questions. And instead of having like all these people post the same questions over and over again, they just put these stickies up here. So we can like take a quick look just at the most recent post just for fun. And by the way, they cover, in this particular forum, they cover bottling and kegging, like anything packaging related. So people ask about a kegging system. People ask about online and kegerator suppliers that are online. They ask about cleaning the draft lines, right? You don't want to have dirty lines and your beer tastes funny because, you know, there's some bacteria or something in there. And let's see, what are some other interesting things here? De-icing a kegerator. So there's a lot of topics that people have questions on. Luckily, they do have a sticky kegging frequently asked questions. So if we just go straight here, we can see that they have all sorts of topics and basic overviews on the topic already. So they have a bunch of links here that, I mean, we don't want to go down the rabbit hole and start looking at all of these. I'll start talking about beer and then who knows what else, but they go real deep. And I mean, there are so many references here. It's kind of amazing. Like I said, I'm an expert in kegging, and I'm sure if I read through this stuff, I would find, you know, new information that I didn't know, things I didn't even know to ask. But the point is, if you're stuck and you don't have any ideas about a specific area of questions or something, or Dennis mentioned, this is a great way to add more content to old posts, just to add like some frequently asked questions. If you go through and take a look at some forums and get some ideas about what other people are asking, things that they're struggling with, it's a great way to, you know, seed your mind with more questions and ideas and topics. So, like I mentioned, this is a great way to get started for, you know, a particular type of, or for content that you're not necessarily familiar with. So, okay, I think that covered it pretty well. Now, the thing you have to do, right? So after you get the questions and you list them out, you got to answer them. So at this point, you have a choice, and this will apply for the other method too. So what you can do, this is what I personally do. I don't write much content anymore. I would take the list and I would probably give that to a writer and say, hey, these are the questions that, you know, I need you to find answers to. I'd like the answers to be, you know, about 150, and I'm just making up a number. Depends on whatever you want. You would ask them to write, you know, 150 to 300 words for each of the questions, and I'd probably ask them to cite the website that they're getting the information from And I would probably also ask that if they believe that a topic is quite complicated and they need more than 300 words to write the answer, I would tell them to let me know. I mean, I think that's important. Again, how much space does a keg take up would be a pretty quick one to answer. There's, a few different sizes of kegs, and, you could answer that. It's pretty straight up. It takes up this much area, this much volume, and, here's how big they look. Why does beer foam so much? Well, like I said, that's kind of a longer answer. What are the common problems with kegging? Well, there's a lot of different problems with kegging, and it depends on a lot of different things. So that may take up more than 200 or 300 words. So I would ask my writer to let me know if they believe that it's a complicated answer, and I would work with them on that. Now, that's the flexibility that I try and give my writers, because I don't want them to, write fluff. I don't want them to try and hit word counts. I'd rather them write, if a post or a question or anything is a short answer, like write a short answer the question. Don't, repeat yourself 4 times in different phrases. Like, I don't want that kind of content. So I give them freedom in the other direction too. If they think it should be longer, well, I'll work with them on it. I'll let them write it longer. I'll pay them more. So that's just, that's a little deeper. But at this point, you have an option, right? So you can hire a writer to do this, or you can write it yourself. If you write it yourself, you have just simplified, and you've made this way less overwhelming. So let's say you're launching a new site and you're like, hey, I know I want to have long form content. I want to write 4,000 words on this topic. That's a scary thing. That's, several pages of content on potentially something that you don't know much about. That's pretty scary. And, that kind of like 4,000 words, that would take me like a week to write. I'm kind of a slow writer, and it would just take me a while. But if you come up with, say, 20 questions, you know that if you just answer those questions, you should probably be getting close to the 4,000 words. And at that point, you have simplified and made the whole process less overwhelming. So you can answer the questions, go ahead, and I would reference whatever and link to whatever you're referencing as your core material, just reference material and the questions and that sort of thing. And then, write out your first draft, and then go away from it for a few minutes, probably a day or two, and go back and read it, maybe edit it a little bit. Maybe you realize you can add more information to the area. And this does 2 things, right? Well, it saved you money. First of all, it did take time, but it saved you a lot of money. And then you also just became an expert on the topic. So spending, an hour or 2 writing an outline, you learn a decent amount from that. When you spend a few hours, maybe several hours writing the content, or at least researching it some, you probably know more on the topic than most people in the world. And you probably know enough to, be an active participant in the niche, rather than just someone who is putting up a site that you don't know anything about the niche, you don't know anything about the products, and you're just trying to make a buck. If you spend the time doing this, even if it's on just a few posts early on, you'll know a lot more, and you'll understand and empathize with the people that are interested in that niche, people that would actually visit your site. So that covers it in general for the FAQ area, the FAQ method here. And we'll move on to RPM, the research paper method. So I'm going to drink a little coffee here for a second while I take a look at the questions as well. Okay. So the research paper method is the method that I used on the site that I covered in Project Go White Hat. That site, I sold with a business partner of mine about, I guess it has almost been 2 months. So it's been about 6 weeks or so. We sold the site for $235,000. It was like the biggest sale that either of us have been a part of, aside from like a house or whatever. And yeah, so we sold it. And this method is what helped me. I was in charge of the content area. So I took a look at the content on our site, and it was bad. It wasn't very good. It wasn't informed. The person that wrote it wasn't informed about the product line. And basically, it didn't convert as well as it could. And it was kind of short form, considering we were making, roughly $9,000 a month from that like one page, right? It was like 2,500 words. So I used a research paper method to develop the post into something better. And I hired a writer. I think he was a former journalist. So he was a good writer. I gave him this outline. I gave him, roughly the word count that I wanted per section. You'll see how this plays out in a second. And basically paid him $200. He wrote about 7,000 or 8,000 words or so that would fit into the existing content on the site. And we, upped it from about 2,500 words to around 10,000 or so. Within 45 days, traffic went up by 40%. So that's great. But the most important thing is the revenue went up by 40%. So we were at about 10,000 plus per month for the overall site. In about 45 days, actually was like, I guess 45 days, maybe closer to 30, but the revenue went up to 14K. Another month went by and it went up to 19K. And then, at this point, we're talking November and December. So December hit over 32,000 for that site. And the main thing was we were adding content. The primary area that we were making the money from, it was this method like played the role, right? It was the research paper method. We added a bunch more content to a page that was already doing well, and we got more traffic, made more money. So it was the right kind of traffic coming to the site, interested buyers, long tail keywords, I believe, are what contributed to bringing the revenue up. The most important thing, but traffic as well. It's good to have people on your site also. Okay. So keeping it simple, just like the last one, you research the topic, then create an outline. Dead simple. I mean, that is really just it. So this one, we're going to do how to brew beer to stick with our alcoholic example here. And I do see some questions popping up, so that's great that you're asking them. And it looks like, for the most part, I'll be able to come back to those in the Q&A session. So this example is going to be how to brew beer. And again, research paper method, we're sticking in Google Docs. It's super easy for me to share these outlines that I create with the writer. Of course, if you want to use some other tool, that's fine. It doesn't really matter. I mean, you really could just create notes on your phone and email those notes to your writer. So the tool doesn't matter at all. I just happen to use Google Docs. I do stick with the outlining format. And at this point, it's a little more difficult, right? So we can't just jump in and start asking questions here. We have to have some background knowledge. So I called it the research paper method because I'm not original. And when I went through the process, I realized, hey, this is just like writing a research paper in middle school or high school or college, where you go to the library. I'm not sure the age of the folks on the on the webinar here, but you go to a library, and that's a place where they have books. And they used to have things called encyclopedias that were physical books, which is like Wikipedia except in a book. And you used to have to look up answers physically, and you couldn't just ask Siri a question and get the answer. So this harkens back to the days where we used to do research papers. And best way to find these resources, I mean, we are going to use the internet. You don't have to go to the library unless you just want to, but that was the origin. That's how I looked at this process. And basically, you Google whatever you're looking up, of course. So you have how to brew beer at home, and then you get some usually pretty decent results. You may see some niche sites out there. You may see just other authority sites, and you'll probably see some ads like we do here. And what you do is, usually within the top 10, because usually Google does a pretty good job providing good results for you. Within the top 10, you should be able to find like 2 to 5 or 6 great resources that are not just thorough, but usually they're authorities in the subject area that you're looking up. And you have to go out there and take a look at them and read them. And, we're seeing more and more rich snippets, and that's what we see here. So we see a rich snippet from the Home Brewers Association, which is, one of the big associations out there in home brewing, obviously. And they have tons of info. So they have info here. We'll actually take a look at some of these a little more deeply. So at this point, you also have what people ask. Google is very smart, and they're telling us more things. And guess what? These are great seeds for the frequently asked questions. And we also see like other resources out there. So Homebrewing 101 from Northern Brewer. This is an e-commerce like online outfit. Actually, they have a couple physical stores in Minneapolis and Wisconsin, but they also have great resources on their site. And also homebrewing.org. I think they're out of Arkansas, actually. So without even looking at very many others, I just looked at a couple big sites. So the key thing here is, again, we can't just like jump in and start trying to organize like how to brew beer at home is going to be formatted and organized in a way that makes sense. So it is important for us to kind of understand the process. So I will say it's probably useful to oops, I didn't mean to open that same window. So basically here, they outline, all the steps for brewing beer, and they keep it like sort of at a high level. So they tell us step 1 through, okay, we could just look at it really quickly. So review. So first thing, you do have to like read through the whole entire process of your recipe before you do anything. So that's kind of funny. It's like when you get a new toy of some kind, a new piece of equipment or whatever, like whatever it is, you should read the directions first, like read the manual first. That's what they're saying. I'm going to go through quick so as to not bore people on beer brewing, but you gather the supplies is step 2. You clean the equipment is step 3. You heat water is step 4. You add malt extract is step 5. You return to the boil in step 6. You add hops in step 7. Step 8 is sanitizing equipment. You're chilling the wort, which is the unfermented beer, for people that want to know what that is. In step 9, you put the yeast in step 10, and then you seal the fermenter in 11. You shake the fermenter in step 12 and 13. You store the fermenter. There's a lot of steps here, as you can see. You monitor the ferment in step 14. In step 15, you boil water so that you can add the priming sugar, and then basically that adds the carbonation. And as we're going through here, there are quite a lot of steps. So I would certainly consolidate some of this information, by the way. So at some point, I would put like 4 of these steps together. So it was more like 10 steps. So I'm going to sort of skip ahead here. You cap the bottles, you store it, you wait for that priming sugar to be fermented, which produces CO2, and that carbonates the beer. And look how happy this guy is. Step 23, of course, is you enjoy the beer. It does take 2 to 3 weeks if you are using this method. If you keg, you can get it done in a week or 10 days. So that's a little secret. Okay, so overall, we got a pretty good overview of what happens. And like I said, I understand people don't want me to read like 24 steps of beer brewing stuff, but if you're doing this research, you should take a look at all the text here. I mean, this is basically like a long infographic, and they're showing you like what to do. It's a greatly simplified version of brewing, even though it was 24 steps, but now you have a good core knowledge of like what's happening. At this point, and let's say you read through everything and you're taking notes and you're trying to understand what's happening here, it's probably taking you like 10 or 15 minutes. Okay, so not a huge amount of time. Next, this is the research paper method, and we're in the research phase. So we are at Northern Brewer, this online supplier, and they do it in 4 steps instead of 24. But as you can imagine, they are trying to get people to buy kits, and I imagine there's probably like a kit somewhere in here. So they break it down into, they abstract it into a much simpler method. You prepare, you brew, you ferment, and then you bottle it. And then of course they say, hey, do you need a starter kit? And if we can go deep into each one of these, but trust me, it's the same as the 24 steps. It's just they haven't spelled out each of the things happening in there. And you read this, you start learning a little bit more about the topic, and at that point, again, you're starting to develop like a bit of an, I guess, background knowledge. You're becoming an expert in this topic. So as you go through, you'll start seeing, common areas. You'll kind of know what's going to happen next. And for sure, there are other, ways to organize the info. They do have the basic brewing process here. And this is this other home brewing site. And they go through a lot more of the same information. So I think you see, what's happening here. And, quick thing to point out, this site talks more about the ingredients, and they give you more background on the hops and the grains and the malt extract, yeast, water, and so on. So as you go through these different areas, right, these different places online to learn about how to brew beer, you're going to be learning like little different pieces. And you'll also see how this information is actually organized. So this is an important thing to notice. So a couple things that I've taken away, and I didn't look through this much ahead of time, so you're actually seeing me like struggle through and try and figure this out with an audience, which is always more exciting than doing it on your own. But what I see here is, this association organized their content. It was pretty verbose. It was very specific. They did 24 steps. This other very large site did it in 4 steps. And I kind of like the way they organized this. 4 steps. It's a little more approachable. I like how they did this. So it's preparation, brew, ferment, and bottling. So, at its core, I would say the first area would be prep, and then like brewing, and then after that is fermenting, and then bottling. So that's like the core of what's happening here. So you'll see that I did research. I saw like a common area that it was organized at least on 2 sites. And trust me, I know that a few other sites organize the information in the same way. And then this is the core 4 steps. And then the other thing that you can do is usually there's going to be a book out there on the topic. So you can go to like Amazon, find some books on the topic, and then go check out their table of contents. a book is usually a lot better than an online resource for many topics out there. It's gone through a publishing process. They've edited it. Like, they spend a lot of time writing the book. I happen to know that this is a book. It's called How to Brew by John Palmer. And this guy, like back in the day when he was getting into brewing, he kept notes online. He like kept a blog about brewing, and eventually it got a pretty big following. It was like the right timing for beer brewing and the craft beer movement in the US, the internet and blogs getting bigger. Eventually this became like an actual print book. And it's a very popular book in the homebrewing community. I have it on my shelf, and I know a lot of my friends do too. So the thing you can do here is take a look at the table of contents of such a book. Like, if you find one online, I just happen to know this one is online, but you can look at the table of contents typically on an Amazon book, or a book which is sold on Amazon. So again, we actually see the synopsis of the brewing process and that sort of thing. I will check to see if there's actually a straight up table of contents in here. Okay, so I'm actually not sure. I should have checked that beforehand, but trust me, there are table of contents out there that can help you organize a book, or sorry, organize your outline based on how they organized it in the book, and you can assume that they are an expert. Now, what we do from here, I see we're close to the top of the hour, so I'm going to kind of go a little faster here and stop rambling on about beer. So what you do here, I mean, this is straight up an outline. So this is where it's really helpful to have that table of contents from a book, because it's basically an outline for the entire book. So preparation, we know, and I'm just going to go through like one of these. So gather materials. So that's one thing. Clean the equipment is what happens there. And several other things, of course, but we'll just kind of keep it on a high level here. So brewing, basically heat water, add malt extract for the extract brewing version. You add hops, chill, and then in the fermenting, you pitch yeast. They call it pitching yeast. Pitch yeast. Monitor the ferments. And then for bottling, add priming sugar and allow to carbonate. Okay, so those are like the high level things, and of course I rushed through this since I realized I was taking up a lot of time. But what you can do through your research is build this out into like what's covered. Each one of these like sections, like this would be a section in the article, in the post. This would be like a subheading, and then there'd be like text underneath, and this would be a subheading within your article and text underneath. So I would go to a writer and say, hey, I need this article written. I will provide you with, some resources that you can reference, and I just need sort of a, consolidated version. Here are some great references that you could take a look at, and, I want you to sort of read and understand those. And at that point, like, working with the writers is not so bad. Like, they have the resources that you want in there, or they have the resources that you want them to reference, and they don't have to spend time going to hunt those down. They just know that you've already done that for them, which is really helpful. And further, I would say you know, I'm going to just mention, like if there's something that I know that I want in there or I do not want in there, I would say, you know, like emphasize this area, emphasize cleaning and sanitation a lot. So just because like that's something that I found that was important when I read the material. So I just want to make sure that, you know, they treat it that way, because if they read some material or maybe they have some background knowledge, they may put in some of their own thoughts which you disagree with. It's fine if they disagree with you, but you can tell them what you want them to put in there and set the expectations straight up. Okay, so I'm going to come back on camera here. I'm going to take a look at some of the questions. If you have questions on the process, actually, let's see if there's any more stuff. Okay, yeah, we're at the Q&A. We're at the Q&A anyway. So there were a few comments in here. If you have questions, please ask them now, and I'll sort of just go through the order which they came in. Steph asks, do you find a style of voice helps convert more? I guess so, right? I don't know what like voice that would be specifically if I just had to like describe it, but I think like authentic converts better. And like if there's a story, right? Like I'm getting more and more into the hook, right? The story of a post. And you really want someone to, you know, read your material. As far as converting, I think if you have like an authentic, you know, to be clear, converting, what I'm talking about is making a purchase on Amazon in the context of our discussion today. The voice should be authentic, something that people would trust. So in general, I would say if the person sounds like they know like what is actually in the, or they know about the product, like that's more trustworthy and that's going to convert better. So I hope that answers the question for you, Steph. But if you go and see, you can check out your competition for niche sites, you'll probably find some where the writer was a hired freelancer that didn't really care, and the tone sounds very just like uninterested. The tone sounds like a poorly written piece of like sales material, maybe you see in a pamphlet, and it's not really engaging. Anyone can read that, you know, on like the manufacturer's website. Like we want to hear something like, you know, I got a beer brewing kit and I brewed beer with my dad. It was a great experience. We bonded over it. That's way more interesting than I got this beer brewing kit. Here's all the stuff that's in it. And you could brew beer in 3 weeks. Like that's boring. The story of like brewing with your family or something like that, or maybe you got a home brewing kit and you went and brewed with your buddies or something like that. Or maybe you're a lady. One of my friends in town here, she got together with a couple other of her lady friends, and they brewed beer because they wanted to have like a lady brewed beer, or a lady brewed beer. Females brewing beer is what I'm trying to say. And like that was a much more interesting, that's a much more interesting story than just like the facts about a product. So, okay. Kat says, how do you know if the article you ordered is accurate, knowing that you don't know about the topic itself? I would spot check it. So pick something in there. In our example today, I would probably pick, you know, something at the beginning, in the middle, and the end of the document. Look at some of the questions in there and go research it yourself. Spend 10 minutes doing it. I mean, here's the thing. There's no like real shortcut, right? So if there's any shortcut, then that means everyone else can do the shortcut, and it's probably a waste of time. So there's like no competitive advantage to like do a shortcut that everyone can do. I mean, maybe you have to do that to get to like a certain level of play or whatever. But the point is, you may have to spend 30 minutes going to research the topic just to make sure the information's accurate. And Kat, not saying that you're not willing to do that, but you may have to get a piece of content back. You may have to read it, and you may have to, you know, evaluate if they did a good job. Spot checking is a valid way to do it. You could assume if like it's 3 out of 3, then probably the rest of it's pretty good too. And I will tell you that my content managers / editors read the content and edit it. And like, if they see discrepancies, something weird in there, they let me know. And I ask them to. And, you know, at this point, you know, if people have watched this before, like I was paying my content managers, $9, $10 an hour. I've given them raises. I'm paying like $15-ish an hour, in general. So, I mean, people are trained. I like working with them. I don't want to lose them. I gave them a raise. They didn't ask for it, and I'm happy to pay more money. I mean, the margins we make on niche sites and online businesses are so high. It's kind of silly for me to like waste time trying to hire more and more people instead of just paying people, you know, a fair wage. So I'm paying more money. Can you get people cheaper? Sure. That's not exactly my goal. So, okay. So Kat, overall, spot check the content, and then that should give you an idea on the overall article. And then Sherry says, can you share a resource site for the correct way to quote a site you used info from? English class was a long time ago. So Sherry, in general, you can just put a link, like wherever you're citing the material is fine. There's no standard way. So first off, there's no standard way. There's no like specifically recognized way. But if you reference it as a resource, you can list it at the end, right? Think about Wikipedia. They have resources listed at the end. And, you know, that's a way to do it too. You could put them all at the end and say like, here's further reading, here's resources that I used. That's totally fine. You could put it like specifically, you know, like put the hyperlink exactly where you're quoting the material. Like if you're actually quoting it, most of the time, right? The methods that I just showed you, like you're not quoting it directly in any portion of it, right? There's not going to be anything where you have to like specifically attribute a section to like that specific URL. If you do use a quote, it's nice if you actually, put the link right there so people know, but there's no standard way. It's just kind of like, and there's no police on like going to check if you're citing the material, but someone could say, hey, you've copied a whole lot of my content. That's bad, right? Like you shouldn't do that. Your writers shouldn't do that. If they do, then you can get in trouble. You can have a DMCA filed against you, and that's obviously not good. And you have to work with the like whoever's filed that against you and, remove the content or cite them properly or whatever. Most of the time you probably have to remove it if it's actually like a copyright issue. But anyway, just put a link in there somewhere and that's usually good enough. People are happy to get links back to their site. Okay. Next, Steph asks, for the example, how to keg beer, would you use the writer's name as the author or no specific author? I never use the writer's name as the author, by the way. When I hire the people, I just tell them that, they're not going to be specifically credited. Their name is not going to be a byline, and it'll be published on a website where, a pseudonym is used. So it's totally up to you, whatever you're implementing on your site. And if you're paying someone to do the writing, you own the copyrights for like that content, right? So like you commission them to do it, they did it, you own it. So you can put your name on it. You can put someone else's name on it. You can publish it as a pseudonym. There's no, right or one way to do it. Dennis says, is there a good way to determine H1, H2, H3 tags? You shouldn't use H1 tags. That should be the title. There should be only one H1 tag on a given page. It should be the title, and WordPress does that automatically if you're using that as your CMS. H2 and H3 tags, no, there's no hard and fast rule to it. I usually use a lot of H2 and H3 tags to break up the text. People skim a lot, and if you have those text breaks, it's easy for them to sort of follow and find the information they're looking for. So there's no, right way. I would say, every 200 to 500 words, put in an H2 or H3 tag. For me, the more is better. Okay, and then next, John says, do you instruct the writers to make sure the content is not copied, copyscape tested? No, that is probably a little bit of a hole in my process, but I usually hire writers that are, pretty professional. At most, what I'll do is when I'm hiring a writer early on, I'll usually take a sentence or two from their submission, whatever they've submitted to me, and I'll put that in quotes. I'll Google it and see if it pops up anywhere. But typically, I don't go through a check. I'm hoping that I'm working with like pros that don't want to have me review them and say this person copied content and then have it on their Upwork profile. I don't think I'm hiring, and I've never had an issue, by the way. The funny thing, the only time I've had an issue with copyscape stuff is when I was working with Text Broker and they had a copyscape check in there, and I would get material that didn't pass copyscape. And they gave me that information. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna pay for this. Like, I'm getting a new writer. This is ridiculous. And that is probably the last time that I used Text Broker. I'm going to mention them. I'm doing this series on content, and on Monday I'm going to publish one, services that you can use to help you if you don't want to, pull together your own team, which takes time and effort. Can use services, but I do talk about Text Broker and iWriter, which I think, for me, they're not a good fit. I'm sure some people can use them for certain areas, but for me, I don't like them. So anyway, I don't do anything specific other than spot check and hope that I'm working with professionals. Jeannie asks, how would you do affiliate links in an article like this? Do you insert products after your writer has finished? Yeah, generally that's what I do. So if it's a purely informational post, like how to brew beer, I would probably say, early on in the equipment section, I would probably say, the preparation, gather the equipment, just like the sites that we looked at. I would say, if you're just getting started with home brewing, they have all-inclusive kits that they have everything you need, and you can get one here. So that's a perfect way to put an affiliate link in informational post. Now, I will make the point that a lot of people think that informational posts can't have affiliate links. That's not true. I put affiliate links in informational posts because if someone is interested in how to brew beer, they're interested in products related to home brewing beer. The thing is, that content isn't best home brewing kit for beginners reviews. It's not that, right? That is what I don't want all my posts on the site to be. I want there to be helpful answers to questions. And like I said, it turns out if a person's interested in some information about a specific topic, they're also interested in products related to that topic. So it makes perfect sense to insert that in certain areas after the writer has finished, putting together all the content. If it happens to be, let's say it's a buyer's guide, let's say it's like the Project Go White Hat article that I talked about before, where it was kind of poorly written, and then we took it from 2,500 words to 8,000. A good chunk of it was indeed the research paper method, and it was like a buyer's guide, pure information. Writer took care of it, he used the resources I gave him, and it was great. Additionally, we added some number of other products to be reviewed. So let's say, I don't remember exactly, but let's say there were 5 products that were reviewed, like mini reviews on that page. We added like 8 more or something. So we added 8 more, and we had that content written as well. And at that point, right, so putting it all together, like there were mini reviews in which affiliate links could be added to each of the mini reviews going to that specific product, where it was coupled with a research paper method. So it's kind of 2 parts. There's like the research paper area, and there's like the product review area down here with each of the products. So you could kind of mix and match if you wanted to. And Sherry says Grammarly will check the content, and it'll copy scape it. So that's true. Okay. Grammarly does that. Okay. Paul says, after listening to my statements about attributes, you're getting major issues with copyright trolls. They don't even ask you to take it down. They simply bill you thousands and then file a suit. This has become a cobble industry. Do I have any copyscape percentage suggestions that you can keep it safe from that? No, I do not know. I would consult a lawyer and check it out. There is, go check out like fair use laws, which are vague at best. But if you're putting a lot of content which is directly from someone else's, then you're not adding your own sort of commentary over it, then you could be running into trouble. But there's probably some generally acceptable amount where maybe if it's like 10% like straight up copied, but you're providing commentary about it, it could potentially be okay. Like you can actually, you look at news stories, they show clips from like movies or from YouTube, or I don't watch much news, so I'm kind of struggling to come up with examples, but they like show what piece of content, whatever it is, and then they provide commentary on it, and that's fair use, right? They're not using the original thing. They're not trying to make money from the original thing and say like selling a clip of like a movie. They're showing like a tiny clip, and then they're talking about it, providing commentary over it. So Paul, I don't know, you should probably talk to a lawyer. Steph says, would the writer Google the article later and then copy your site? Or do you change the draft enough that they don't find it? Or does it not matter to me? I guess it doesn't matter. I've never thought of that. So you're saying, would the writer that I hired go copy the site? Is that what you're asking, Steph? And then Sherry says, do you still use a pseudonym when publishing? Yeah, generally you're probably using a pseudonym on a lot of niche sites. So Steph clarified and says, yeah, so Steph is talking about the writer going and grabbing their article and then copying it later. Yeah, I don't worry about that. I usually don't change the article much. Just, edit it for grammar, or rather the editor edits for grammar and then takes it from there. Yeah, and that part, as far as like the writer copying their own work, you have a record of, the transaction and the work agreement and stuff, unless you somehow paid them with cash. So, you're pretty much good. I don't think they're going to be like trying to file or copy the content from you. And let's see here. Okay, any other questions here? Any other questions out there? And you know what? While we're just hanging out here, I'll tell you that the topic for Monday, right? The topic that I'm publishing a new piece of content, part 2 of the 3-part series on content. I will talk about hiring for content. That is the very not creative title, the working title right now, hiring for content. And I'm going to talk about mistakes that I made hiring people over the years and where you can actually outsource content, right? So, and how to get content written and just generally things that'll help you avoid mistakes. A couple of the common questions that I've seen is like, what should you do if you're not a native English speaker or whatever language that you're trying to, write in? It doesn't matter if it's English or not. And let's see, what should I do if the content's bad? I talk about that. I talk about releasing a writer if it didn't go well. Jeannie says, thanks for the webinar today. I really enjoyed the content. Thanks for keeping the momentum the whole time. Mahalo. Yeah. Thank you, Jeannie. Appreciate you hopping on. And Steph, appreciate you coming on too. Leo, awesome. Yeah, I'll be looking forward to publishing this too. And Drew, thanks. And let's see, Drew says, I'll need to email to study the replay. It'll be, yeah, if you got this, if you got the email to attend, you'll get an email of the replay. It will be on YouTube later. So, okay, cool. Looks like we're finishing up here. And if you do have like additional questions and stuff, like you can, one, ask me in the comments to the blog or some like YouTube video or something like that. But comments on the blog would be good, especially in the part 1 of this case study. I'm pointing at it over there, but you can't see the screen. But basically, I may end up doing a part 4 based on just additional questions that I get. So I see I'm getting more and more, like if I provide information, people have follow-up questions. So I want to cover that, and I'll probably do that as well. So I will plan on probably doing another webinar at this same time next week, again, sort of highlighting some of the areas of like actually hiring or working on content yourself. So I'll probably just pick 2 of like the 3 or 4 ways you can, hire people to do content for you. Okay, one more question here. Kat says, how many writers do you usually go through before employing one? So I usually don't have people like on staff, right? I don't have them on like all the time. So I'm just hiring freelancers for specific projects. Typically, I'll try and hire twice as many people than I think I need, assuming that some people will flake out and some won't be that good. That said, I've been having a better success rate. So I end up with maybe 75% that are good. And, at that point, I'll just keep the best ones that I need. So if you're hiring people, I would say try to hire twice as many as you need, as you think you need, and do a trial job, because that'll be a helpful way to sort of sort through the noise in general. So, and Dennis says, and Kat, hopefully that helps, but basically like anything that you do with internet marketing or probably life, like it's probably going to take you a little bit longer than you think, and it'll probably be a little bit harder, and more things are going to go wrong than you expect. Unless you're just a pessimist, that'll probably be true. So an analogy, it was in a book that I read, I think it was Essentialism, which is a good book, by the way, but like if you're going to the mall or something and one time it took you 10 minutes and now moving forward, you're like always thinking in your head, it just takes 10 minutes to get to the mall, but that was just the best case scenario. What I'm trying to say is most of the time when you drive to the mall, it doesn't take 10 minutes. It takes like 15 or 20 minutes because of traffic, or maybe there's construction or something. So in general, like if you think, hey, I need to hire one writer, and you're putting all your faith in the one writer, is probably going to be harder than you expect. Something is going to go wrong, and you'll have to figure out how to deal with it. So if you just have the right expectation that things are going to be a little harder than you think, it's a lot easier to like continue on and push through. So, okay. Dennis says, you mentioned a new technique on the last call. I don't remember, Dennis. Do you have any other context around it? I don't remember the new technique. Oh, and for people that have watched this long, we did all of this through just blogs and like the written word. YouTube is really good. So you can actually like YouTube, like search in YouTube for a couple topics, right? Find a couple videos and then tell your VA, your writer, to watch those and summarize the content. Okay. And okay, let's see. Yeah, Dennis is talking about something that I'm trying different on the last call, and it was yesterday. I'll have to think back. This is bad. I don't even remember what I talked about yesterday. Yesterday was Wednesday. So we're just rambling on, me and Dennis now. Yeah, what was the topic yesterday, Dennis? Do you remember? Or was it, there was something I was doing a couple days ago that hopefully I'll talk about soon. Okay, Kat says something I mentioned on Facebook. Oh, an experiment with a thumbs up. Cool, cool. Okay, yeah, people hung on this long, I'll tell you right now, because I imagine we lost a lot of the folks. But basically, there were two or three things that I was sort of testing. So one thing that I realized is a lot of my YouTube videos were just like too long. They're super long. I don't even watch videos that long in general. And they weren't tight, and I was just, getting stuff out there. It was good to work through that, though. Did a lot of videos. A lot of people watched them. It's cool. The other thing is, like, it seems like YouTube is giving some preference, and Google, too, is giving preference to live stream videos. Live stream is very important. I mean, technically, we're doing a live stream right now, though it's through the Webinar Jam platform, but you'll notice I've been doing just a whole bunch of live streams. The thing is, they were kind of random. Again, kind of like my previous YouTube stuff. I was doing, long videos, and they're a little too long, and they weren't as tight as they should be. Chris, what's up? Thanks for joining. We're just finishing up, actually, but thanks for hopping on. Then the other part was I wasn't really targeting keywords, right? I'm all about the keyword golden ratio and like going after low competition stuff. I'm like, in general, I haven't been doing that for niche site project number 1, right? So it's super competitive. I don't get a ton of SEO traffic. And part of the reason is I'm just writing about what I'm doing, and I'm not trying to get SEO traffic, which is dumb. I need to do that. The other part is I wasn't doing SEO for YouTube. So my topic the other day when I was talking about this was a general topic in which I want to rank for, and there is, pretty stiff competition, but, I've been told like my content's better. Like, I'm a practitioner of this stuff, and some of the other competitors they're not, they're just like repeating. They have big followings, and they're just repeating stuff that maybe they did 4 years ago. They're talking about what they did 4 years ago and it doesn't really work anymore, or they're just talking about stuff that they've read elsewhere. So the point is, I've tried to, get more engagement on the specific videos, getting the likes, which is a good sign. And then the other part is to actually, do a live stream with a topic that is something that I'm trying to rank for, and see if there is actually a boost because it's a live stream, and if I can like gain some momentum. So the idea would be, potentially I could do tighter videos on specific topics that people actually have questions on that I'm trying to rank for, so I can like actually get more traffic, more eyes through like suggested video views and like organic reach within the YouTube platform, as well as Google, right? So Google searches they provide YouTube videos. If I have like a strong YouTube video that has the right content, the right information, and it was live streamed, and I get some sort of artificial boost because Google wants more people live streaming on the YouTube platform, hey, I'll take that. You know, you got to show up every day and do these videos. But it's really interesting. And I talked about the mistakes that I made before where the videos are too long. I'm not going after the right kind of content. I'm just rambling on. I mean, it took me all that time to figure out that I was doing stuff wrong. So it's, you know, the journey helps you figure stuff out. So that's what the experiment was. And I don't think I'll have any data for a few days, maybe a few weeks, maybe a few months. But that is what I was doing. And I'll probably do a separate video because I'm going to ramp up here shortly and shoot a bunch of videos for new YouTube stuff, hopefully in the 6 to 8 minute range, so people actually watch it. So anyway, thanks for asking about that, Dennis. I kind of just pushed past it, didn't mention it before. So, okay, cool, everyone. I am going to jet. I'm going to go for a little walk here. Everyone have a good rest of the day. You know, look out for the post on Monday and look out for the webinar, another webinar next Thursday. Tell your friends. That helps me. If you can, if someone you know that may enjoy this kind of content, let them know, share this around. That'll be awesome. So, all right, see you, everyone. Thanks.